Russian President Vladimir Putin just needs everyone to take a deep breath and chill. Putin held an annual news conference Thursday and addressed a number of topics, including international relations with North Korea. Putin called for de-escalation between the U.S. and the Hermit Kingdom, saying recent military drills by the U.S. aren't helping ease tension. He also jabbed U.S. lawmakers for wanting Russian help with the North, while also putting Russia on the, quote, same shelf as North Korea and Iran. Putin's comments come as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un issued yet another threat on Thursday. Kim said the U.S. is taking a big step toward nuclear war by seeking a possible naval blockade. In November, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson mentioned the idea of a naval blockade that would stop any goods from being transferred to or from North Korea.
And Russia's president says a U.S. strike on the DPRK would have catastrophic consequences. He hopes to work with Washington to solve this crisis. Speaking at an annual news conference in Moscow, Vladimir Putin said he does not accept the DPRK's nuclear status. He added that some of Washington's past actions provoked the DPRK to violate a 2005 agreement to curb its nuclear program.
Basically, there was an agreement between with North Korea that in 2005 that they will suspend their nuclear program, and they've made certain commitments, and everybody was happy. We all agreed and signed this agreement. Then a few months later, the United States decided to go beyond this agreement, and they froze their assets, their bank accounts of North Korea, and they said that North Korea should do something in addition to this agreement, something that goes beyond that agreement. And North Korea then withdrew from this agreement and relaunched its nuclear program. Why did you do that? This agreement was not enough. Why did you sign this agreement if you thought this was not enough? You provoked North Korea to withdraw from this agreement.
Putin added that Russia will not be dragged into a new arms race with the United States.
Japan will impose additional sanctions on North Korea by freezing the assets of 19 of the rogue nation's institutions. This according to Japan's top government spokesman, addressing the repeated threats by Pyongyang's missiles and nuclear program. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has spoken on the phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin about the ongoing situation in the Korean Peninsula. The Kremlin said in a statement that the leaders agreed to continue contacts but did not provide any further details. Tensions between Washington and Pyongyang reached a new peak last month when North Korea announced its missiles had the capabilities of reaching the US mainland.
The U.S. is set to further ramp up the pressure on North Korea at the United Nations. The State Department says Secretary of State Rex Tillerson will seek to rally members of the Security Council on Friday to turn the screw on North Korea. Tillerson is slated to take part in a Security Council ministerial briefing regarding North Korea's nuclear weapons program. Spokeswoman Heather Nauert says Tillerson will reaffirm the Trump administration's push for, quote, maximum pressure on Pyongyang so that it gives up its weapons programs. North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency lashed out at the U.S. for convening the meeting. In typical propaganda fashion, the report said, quote, the meeting is none other than a desperate measure plotted by the U.S., being terrified by the North State nuclear force. In a separate broadcast, the North slammed the U.S. over the possible use of a naval blockade on its ships, warning such a move would drive the situation on the Korean peninsula to the brink of war.
The senior UN envoy who recently returned from a visit to North Korea has expressed serious concern about an accidental move toward conflict. Speaking to CNN on Thursday, Jeffrey Feltman said he was worried about the lack of communication channels with Pyongyang and that there was a high risk of some kind of miscalculation that could lead to war. He added the lack of trust has driven the regime to rely on military deterrence in the short term. Earlier this week, he's also reported to have said Pyongyang is not likely to engage in dialogue and will continue its nuclear program until it has a deterrent capability. Feltman was the first senior UN official to visit the North in 6 years. And during his 4-day trip, he met with high-level Pyongyang officials, including Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho.
Remnants of a drone and a short-range missile. U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley claimed that these remnants of weapons were made in Iran and then transferred by the Shia country to the Houthi militia in Yemen.
In this warehouse is concrete evidence of illegal Iranian weapons proliferation gathered from direct military attacks on our partners in the region.
The Pentagon says this missile was used in an attack against an international airport in Saudi Arabia in November. Under some regulations defined in the Iranian nuclear deal, Iran is forbidden to supply or transfer any weapons without the consent of the Security Council, the place where Ambassador Haley plans on taking her evidence next.
It's not just European countries that we're going to be asking. We're going to be asking the entire international community. And yes, we will start with the Security Council in terms of doing that. But it is time for all of them to wake up. This is going to be eye-opening.
Haley did not elaborate on when or where these arms had been found, citing this information to be classified. But the Pentagon referred to Iranian corporate logos and designs on the remnants, which it says are unique to the Iranian defense industry.
Iran has responded to American ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley's claims that the US had proof of Iran defying the international community by supplying sophisticated weapons to Houthi rebels in Yemen. Iran called Haley's accusations fabricated, irresponsible, provocative and destructive, adding that these accusations were merely cover-ups for the violations of the Saudis in Yemen's civil war. The Trump administration has stood in strong opposition to the Iranian regime in regional politics, with the US president announcing in October that he decertified the Iranian nuclear deal instituted during the previous administration.
These rallies are almost always seen as a poll on a party's support. For this, Hamas attracted a crowd easily in the thousands in southern Gaza. With a huge poster of Jerusalem as the backdrop, speaker after speaker condemned the US decision to recognise the city as Israel's capital. Hamas's leader suggested that Donald Trump was now left politically isolated, given the international condemnation of the move.
The American and Israeli position is weakened on the international level, and for the first time in the history of the conflict, the whole world is on one side, with Trump and Netanyahu on the other side alone. This is more evidence of the weakness of their position.
A White House official has admitted a temporary cooling-off period is possible in its Israeli-Palestinian peace plan, but says the administration is still moving ahead with it. The official told Israeli daily Haaretz that the White House had anticipated the negative reactions to the U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
3 more rockets have just been fired from the Gaza Strip at Israeli territory. This is the 6th night in a row that we've seen rocket fire, and as usual, the army has swiftly retaliated by bombing Hamas military targets inside the Strip. As you can see in this video taken near the Gaza border, the Iron Dome intercepted 2 of the rockets, exploding them in midair before they could do any damage. The other rocket apparently misfired and actually damaged a school inside the Gaza Strip. As escalations and clashes between Israel and the Palestinians continue, the Israeli border police brings to a close a weeks-long covert operation and arrested 367 Palestinians illegally residing in Israel. The arrest raids were initiated a little after 3 a.m. across many areas throughout the country. Over 1,600 border police officers took part in the operation, one of Israel's largest, now dubbed Operation Green Candles. Of the 367 arrested, 38 were residents of Gaza, and in addition to the 367, 12 suspects were arrested for employing the illegal residents, and 4 more were arrested on suspicion of being responsible for moving them about. Also collected during the raids were 55 gas canisters used in the manufacturing of explosives, 2 pipe bombs, 16 Molotov cocktails, and 3 weapons. An explosive lab thought to be supplying bombs out of a private residence in Abu Dis was also shut down.
An American military spokesman said Wednesday, 2 U.S. fighter jets intercepted 2 Russian planes in Syria. This after the Russians crossed a deconfliction line, and the U.S. fired chaff and warning flares in a confrontation that lasted 40 minutes. The spokesman said one of the Russian planes flew so close to a U.S. jet that the 2 aircraft nearly collided. According to the spokesman for the Air Force Central Command, the Russian planes have been breaching U.S. coalition airspace up to 8 times a day since early November.
Coming soon to the front lines of combat, U.S. cyber soldiers armed with keyboards, codes, and electromagnetic tools to support traditional military operations.
We are talking about today our ability to provide a cyber capability to a commander at the tactical level.
Cyber soldiers are now integrating with traditional troops in training. The goal is to make on-the-ground cyber units regular elements of a battle plan, unleashing weapons like the so-called cyber bombs that the U.S. dropped last year on ISIL. The weapons, essentially hacks, disrupted ISIL's communications and operations, weakening the group.
Prepare for total war, not limited war.
One sign of progress is the shrinking size of battlefield equipment used by cyber units. This is only one small piece of the larger dishes used traditionally, and they have shrank to these compressed kits now used on the battlefield. Cyber war, though, is not confined to a combat zone. The biggest threats are state-sponsored hackers looming in cyberspace.
You know, it's oftentimes referred to as the last form of warfare, or as the last war, as far as cybersecurity is concerned. And it's very important to have your military at least have a strong understanding of the various threats that are out there, and to have a component that is on par with the various adversaries.
Analysts fear the U.S. is already behind the curve. Russian hackers famously stole emails from the U.S. Democratic National Committee last year, and Chinese hackers are accused of regularly stealing secrets from U.S. industry. The internet is a seemingly boundless new theater of combat, spurring the cyber arms race across the globe.
Due to allegations of misuse of funds and corruption by the Somali military, the U.S. government is cutting aid to some Somali military units. Aid will still be given to Somali military units that are monitored directly by U.S. military advisors or are actively engaged in fighting extremist groups. This decision occurs as the U.S. has become more involved in the fight against al-Shabaab and ISIS. The U.S. is also becoming more dependent on the Somali military as thousands of troops from the Africa Union mission in Somalia plan to withdraw by 2020.
The U.S. announced that it will provide Lebanon with a military aid package valued at over $120 million. American Ambassador Elizabeth Richards said that the package, unveiled on December 13th, includes 6 new light attack helicopters, 6 unmanned aerial vehicles, and communication and night vision devices. Richards said that the new $120 million military assistance package will help the Army build on its steady, strong capability to conduct border security and counterterrorism operations. Commander of U.S. Central Command General Joseph Votel, who oversees U.S. military operations in the region, said the U.S. was proud to be partners with the Lebanese armed forces and very glad to be associated with them. Washington has provided more than $1 billion in military assistance to Lebanon since 2006.
A Greek anarchist group has attacked Saudi Arabia's embassy in Athens. The video footage shows members of the group, Rovikones, smashing windows of the embassy at dawn on Thursday. They also threw paint at a structure. A statement by the group says they were protesting what they called Riyadh's medieval repression against its own people and its involvement in the Yemen conflict. An inquiry is reportedly underway. The anarchist group has claimed dozens of such actions targeting embassies, businesses, and government offices.
Greece has ground to a halt as workers walked off their jobs as part of a 24-hour strike that shut down services across the country in protest against years of austerity measures. Thousands of strikers in Athens marched to Parliament and stood outside as lawmakers debated the 2018 budget. While people took to the streets in peaceful protest, a group of hooded men destroyed ticket machines at an Athens metro station. State-run hospitals were accepting only emergency cases as medical staff joined in the strike alongside ordinary workers. Low wages and redundancies, this is our reality. People and families are left without money, without work. We will not allow it. We will stand up and fight for our rights. We are in a dead end. We cannot live. We cannot support our families. We have to fight for our children. They deserve a better future. Euronews correspondent in Greece says the government argues that the economy is already improving and austerity will soon be a thing of the past. But workers and the unemployed claim they're the losers in the country's crisis and will never regain what they've lost.
EU leaders also signed a new deal on improved defence cooperation and investment. Migration was also a big issue here on Thursday. The policy of sharing the burden has met fierce resistance, particularly from states in Eastern Europe. Plans to abandon those quotas have not gone down well with countries like Germany, Greece and Italy. Now, the focus has shifted to sending more money to Libya to improve the conditions of migrants trapped there and to persuade them to return to their home countries. The one thing they do all agree on is that they do not want a repeat of the migration surge of 2015.
We start this afternoon with a critical vote at the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC has repealed net neutrality regulations by a vote of 3-2. The decision overturns Obama-era regulations prohibiting internet providers from blocking websites and charging consumers for high-quality internet service. RT's David Miller was at net neutrality protests earlier today and has the story.
In a 3-2 vote down party lines this morning, the FCC voted in favor of the first enforceable net neutrality regulations. And as you can see behind me, the American people have gathered to protest that decision. The agency's Republican majority approved a plan to scrap the rules preventing internet providers like Comcast and AT&T from blocking or slowing web traffic. The FCC today voted 3-2 along party lines to repeal the Obama-era net neutrality regulations, handing a victory to telecom providers over the objections of tech companies including Netflix, Reddit, and Etsy. Today's vote was delayed for a brief time by an apparent bomb threat, but that did not stop the FCC from moving forward to what some call the death of the internet. And as you can see behind me, many flowers have been laid in front of the FCC's building as if a memorial for the internet. Dozens of congressional Democrats and at least one Republican urged the FCC to cancel today's vote, but the chairman did vow to move forward with the plan. Now, ironically, the same Democrat commissioners fighting for freedom of speech for the internet refused to interview with myself because I'm with RT America, while doing interviews for every other network out here. Also news today, as many as 2 million net neutrality comments, many of which were negative, were filed to the FCC were fake, according to the New York Attorney General's office. Several attorneys general and Democrats urged an investigation into the comments ahead of today's vote. So as the protests wrap up here today, we heard a number of concerns, including concerns over the right to free speech, corporations gaining larger and getting richer, and also many health concerns, environmental concerns also. But the main concern is that this fight is not going to stop, that they continue to pursue actions against the FCC not to take away these protections.
Digital assistants sold by Amazon and Google are listening possibly even when you think they are not. A consumer watchdog organization studied patent filings for both companies. It says that Alexa and rival Google Home could start recording more information than you realize. Jamie Yukas explains how the companies might use that data that they hear in the future.
What's the weather tomorrow?
Tomorrow in Alhambra, you'll see lots of sun.
Elizabeth Saldivar has been relying on her Amazon Echo ever since she got one as a Christmas gift last year.
Did you have any concerns when you first got it? Well, you know, I actually never really thought about it.
Google and Amazon, the leading companies that make these devices, say they only record your voice when you activate them with so-called wake words.
Alexa, turn on the hall lights.
Okay. Those recordings are then transmitted back to Amazon and Google servers, where the questions are analyzed and answered. While that's how they work now, some are worried that could change in the near future.
They're there to track you, to surveil you, and to sell you.
The advocacy group Consumer Watchdog studied dozens of patent applications for possible future advances in Google and Amazon's smart home technology.
What these patents describe is that they're always watching. They're always listening.
One Amazon patent shows the company could instruct the Echo device to listen for designated trigger words, like a discussion of vacation destinations. It could then transcribe that conversation and use it to try to sell the user of the device a related product.
I just think that it's concerning that they would be able to have access to my private life.
A spokesperson for Amazon tells CBS This Morning, "We do not use customers' voice recordings for targeted advertising. Patents take multiple years to receive and do not necessarily reflect current developments to products and services." A Google representative told us Consumer Watchdog's claims are unfounded. But the claims do point out how little some consumers know about the digital gadgets in their homes.
Play Christmas radio. It almost feels a little bit like Big Brother-ish.
Our universe is a bit more crowded than we thought. NASA's planet-hunting Kepler Space Telescope found an 8th planet circling Kepler 90, a sun-like star about 2,500 light-years from Earth. The finding ties Kepler 90's solar system with our own for most planets. The new rocky planet is extremely hot and orbits its star about once every 2 weeks. Astronomers made the discovery with help from Google's machine learning technology, which teaches software to recognize data patterns without explicit programming. In this case, it scanned a dataset of 35,000 likely signals to find the new planet. The Kepler Space Telescope has confirmed more than 2,500 alien worlds and discovered thousands more candidates. These findings have allowed for further exploration of the farthest reaches of the universe and helped drive the search for other habitable worlds.
It's the photo that's touching everyone. A young man helping an 83-year-old gent down an escalator. The image of them, arms linked, is warming hearts across America. The elderly man was frozen with fear as he stood at the top of an escalator at a mall in Holyoke, Massachusetts. He was terrified to get on, mainly because of a previous frightening experience he once had on an escalator. That's when 23-year-old Alonzo Johnson stepped in.
I saw an elderly man just looking for someone to show that they cared and to help him through fear that he had.
Johnson, who was doing some summer shopping, extended his arm and gently escorted his new pal down the escalator.
We were just talking going down the escalator, and it was more of me just having him talk so he can get his mind off of things. I told him about how his hat looked really nice and how he looked very good for being an 83-year-old man.
A hospice nurse took the photograph and posted it to her Facebook page. It instantly went viral. Humanity doesn't get any better than this, went one reaction. The world needs more people like this. It's not unusual for the elderly to be afraid of escalators. We found upsetting moments on YouTube showing older folks struggling. Here, a man tumbles off one of them. 74-year-old Langley Deaver understands the fear. What can be scary for, say, a senior citizen when using an escalator?
Oh my gosh. I always worry I'm going to trip. You know, getting on, I mean, it can be difficult. You know, I've tried to time it. Sometimes I hold on
with both hands. Now, more proof that a small gesture of kindness can have a big impact.
For me, it's more of what my mom always taught me, that to always do the right thing and always to help people whenever you can.